Alrighty. Well, my name is Norm Stenze. For the last 20 years of my working career, I worked in the DCC industry. 10 of those years were with Digitrax. The first 10 of those years, which I consider probably the golden era of DCC. That's when it was all brand new, and all of us were rock stars when we went to the conventions. It was the most fun time to be at. Now it's it's just something that's now just a accepted part of model railroading. But I worked for Digitrax. I worked for Tony's Train Exchange, where I was selling all brands and did a lot of work with QSI, sold NCE. Then I went to work for TCS for the last last 4 years of my career. So I've been in the industry basically from its beginning till 2016. So anything after 2016 is black magic to me. But yeah. The other thing is this clinic does not cover decoders. This is how to get your layout to where your Digitrax system will work and should run anybody's decoder on it. Decoders are a black hole that I don't want to get into. First thing is that I'm going to cover the common myths of DCC. And like I said, some of these were actually perpetuated by those of us in the industry. The 2 wires to your track was how DCC was first presented. And that is, I can't say it the way I want to say it. That was bullpucky. Pardon me? Huh? But basically, it was a great marketing ploy, but it would only work on an oval of track. So the second you put a turnout in place, all of a sudden you've introduced wiring that needs to be done. Oh, I can hold it anywhere you want. Problem is holding 2 mics. Glad you know what you're doing. Just go to the second slide. There you go. It's up. Okay, we're running. Okay. Okay. All right, can you hear me now? Okay. It's AC, so you don't need any rail gaps. That would be great. But it's square wave AC, and we have not reinvented the laws of physics. So electricity is still electricity, so you still have to deal with circuits. You need feeder wires every 3 feet. I've got a lot of friends that have put feeder wires on every single piece of flex track. No. If you do it, you don't hurt anything. You talk about bulletproof. You've made it cannon proof if you do that, but it's not necessary. And this is a do as I say, not as I do type of thing. We used to recommend like every 12 feet, 12, 15 feet, something like that is adequate. If you come to my railroad this Saturday during the pilgrimage, I put one lead in every block. And some of those blocks are 30 feet long. And it works fine. If I have a problem, I solder that rail joint and everything's fine again. But the other thing is use very, very heavy wire. We have people that were using welding cable to, it's not necessary. It's nice to have, say, 16 or 12 gauge wire as your bus under the table, and then run feeder wires with whatever you're comfortable. I use 22 gauge. You can use either stranded or solid wire. It doesn't matter, whatever you're comfortable with. Let's see. It's convenient to use the track bus for your DCC accessories like switch decoders and things like that. Yeah, it's convenient, but it doesn't work. Run a train through a closed turnout. What do you need to do to fix it? You need to throw the turnout. Well, if the bus is down, the accessory decoder is not going to work. So you need a separate bus for your accessories. It can be just a separate power district on your railroad using a PM42, or I guess it's PM74 now. I mean, they got all these new ones. But make your accessory bus separate from the bus that you're using to run your trains. The big one that really gets me is DCC friendly turnouts. If it worked in DC, it will work in DCC. To me, it was just an excuse to write magazine articles. And if you've ever looked at some of the wiring diagrams some of these guys have come up with for a DCC friendly turnout, it's enough to make you take up model farming. It is not necessary. Turnouts, if a turnout worked in DC and didn't short out when your train went through it in DC, it's not going to short out when you go through it in DCC. And that has bugged me forever. I mean, to me, it was just an excuse to sell more turnouts. And it's another reason that turnouts are so damn expensive, was because they've made them all DCC friendly, which requires a lot of extra tooling and extra wiring under the turnout. There's nothing wrong with it. I mean, they work fine, but they're totally unnecessary. Okay, we're going to talk Digitrax now. The heart and soul of Digitrax system is LocoNet. LocoNet is a six wire flat cable. It's the same wire that goes to your throttles, but it's also the wire that will run from your command station to your, if you have extra boosters, to your boosters, or to your plugins on the layout. It's a peer-to-peer local area network. It's a LAN. And the nice thing about peer-to-peer is that it allows, essentially, you can add as new products come out, they will work with the existing products without making any change to the command station or anything like that, because basically they just listen for a command that's addressed to them. If it's not addressed to them, they ignore it. So the other components can continue to work. Most other systems use a polled system, which is Mother May I. You've got the command station sitting there going, have you got anything? 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 Does that extremely fast, and it's extremely efficient. But it has to know something's out there to ask it. So consequently, you have to update the command station sometimes when they go to some new technology or new product that the command station is unaware of. Let's get this to work right. There we go. LocoNet cables. This is where people screw up their layouts. It's not my fault. Ain't technology great? Pardon me? Well, they usually are if you're not trying to broadcast to the world. Okay, now you got the right slide up there. Yeah, take it to the next slide and then bring it back. Of course, now it doesn't advance. There we go. Okay, back it up. There we go. Okay. Okay, your LocoNet system will only work as good as your LocoNet cables. Cables should always be made up with the flat 6-wire cable. I know a lot of people gotten a great deal on the round 6-wire cable. The stuff will work, but there's no way to keep the wires organized so that you get the right wire in the right place. The 6-wire cable works every time, and it goes into the RJ12 connectors much easier. It's a lot easier. And then when you're making up your LocoNet cables and you put the ends on them, AJ Ireland at Digitrax always taught me, just when you're looking at the plug with the clip up, it's on the right. I don't care which end of the cable you're working on, it's always white on the right. And if you follow that through the entire construction of your railroad, your LocoNet cables will be fine. Okay. It's more difficult, but there we go. Stop that. Come on back. Okay, LocoNet uses an RJ12 connector. You can get, and a lot of people mix them up with RJ11s. And you can see the difference right off the bat when you see them side by side. They both plug into the same socket, but one has 4 contacts and one has 6 contacts. I had a good friend who rewired his whole LocoNet system on his railroad. He was so proud of himself. He bought a crimping tool and he made all these cables. And we'll get to the problem there. He didn't test them, but he put them all in and nothing worked. Well, he used the right ends. He had the RJ12 ends, but he had a crimping tool that was made for the RJ11s. So it only crimped the center 4 contacts. The other 2 contacts were out in the breeze, and he only had half of a plug. When you make up your LocoNet cables, and this is some of the most critical part of installing Digitrax on your layout. purchase a good RJ12 crimping tool. You don't have to get the $100 one, but get the $20 or $30 one that will reliably crimp the tools. Don't get the cheap plastic ones. They'll crimp one end maybe well, the second one maybe, the third one, And the worst thing you can do, and then use only the flat wire. And then this is the important part. Test each cable when you make it. There's nothing worse than going into a layout that's got 5, 6, or 20 LocoNet cables all plugged in. Nothing works. Where do you start? Where do you look? Best thing to do is each cable you make, test it. And how do I test it, you ask? Most of you, if you have the older Digitrax systems, ones with the DCS 100 or the DB 150 as the command station, they came with an LT1. You may not have known what it was, but it came in the box. That is your LocoNet tester. It's basically just a socket for the RJ12 connector with 4 LEDs on it. You plug your LocoNet cable into it, plug it into your booster, and make sure that all the lights come on. If they don't, then go back and recrimp the cable. If recrimping it doesn't work, cut the end off, put a new end on, crimp it. That cable's no good till you get all the lights on. And there is a little gotcha here that I'm going to explain to you that's never explained in any of the manuals. And this is it. Every engineer, and I worked for a lot of them that had a DCC company or has a DCC company, they're eccentric as hell. They are convinced that only they know how to do anything, and some of them are basically lazy. When AJ Ireland with Digitrax, who's the one I'm the most familiar with, designed the DCS 100, the 6 wires on a LocoNet cable, there's like 3 wires. There's like ground, power, and data. So that's why you can flip them and they mirror each other. Well, he decided that there's a ground on this side. I don't need to put the ground on the other side in the command station. So if you just plug an LT1 into a DCS 100, one of the LEDs won't light. It'll come up with 3 LEDs. The way to get around that is to plug a throttle into the other jack on a DCS 100. The throttle will make the other ground. You know, I can't justify it, but that's the way it was, and you will never talk AJ out of the fact that that's the way it should have been. So basically, you should get all the LEDs should light. If they don't, if only 3 of them, 2 of them, 1 of them, none of them, yes. That is an uneven crimp. Go back and recrimp it. I wouldn't put anything past him. But basically, if you don't see 4 strong LEDs, there's something wrong with the cable, and address it. Usually recrimping will take care of it. If it doesn't, put a new end on it. Maybe a crimp missed a wire, or something like that. But that's critical. If you don't do that, there's nothing worse than having a questionable LocoNet cable on your layout. It will drive you nuts, and they are extremely hard to find once you've got them installed on your layout. They're very easy to fix when it's sitting on your workbench, but once it's on the layout and figuring out which one is not working is a pain in the butt. When you string your LocoNet distribution, it's very forgiving. You can do a lot of things with it. You can daisy chain it, just go from unit to unit to unit to unit to unit to unit, and that works beautifully. Or you can take it, to a connector and just tee off of it and go off, and then tee off of that and go off. You can star it. You can go to these you can buy these, you used to be able to, I think you still can, these connectors that have 6 or 8 RJ12 connectors or sockets on them, and just plug LocoNet cables in them to your heart's delight, and it'll work fine. The one thing you can't do is do not loop it back on itself. So if you've got a layout that goes around the room and you've got your booster here, you can take a cable around this way, take a cable around this way, but don't join them in the middle. I think it's a dead short, but it will not work. The other thing is you can only have one boss on any layout, and I don't care how big the layout is, you can only have one command station. So, and the reason I know this because it's just logical, but if you have a second command station on the layout, they will argue with each other and nothing will get done. One of my jobs when I was working for Digitrax, whenever we went to a train show, a bunch of us were assigned to go to all these layouts that were running Digitrax, and especially the modular groups. Because every one of them, a lot of them, they were combining 2 or 3 groups into one layout, and every one of them had their own command station. And it was our job to make sure that only one of them was the command station, and the other 2 were dumb. Now you can take any command station and you can disable the command station part of it and just make it a booster. And that's usually op switch 2, which is under option switch setup in every Digitrax manual I've ever seen. So I won't go into the particulars on how to do it. It's very simple to do, but it's in every system manual that I've ever seen that came out of Digitrax. And it's always under option switch setup, and it's always been option switch 2. And generally you have to close, I think it's, don't quote me on it. I think you close it. But that will turn off the command station in that particular unit, and it will just be a booster, an expansion booster. Now, of course, when you get that booster back home again, you're going to have to turn it back on again, or your system's not going to work. Okay, this I'll go through real quick. There are, I believe there's a UP7 now. But Digitrax made the UP3 originally. These are the little panels that plug into that go in the fascia for plugging in your throttles. The Digitrax units, especially the UP3 and the UP5, have a bunch of extra diodes and resistors and all sorts of gobbledygook on them for theoretically for charging batteries in some of the throttles. I don't know if it ever really worked, but it's in every one of them. So consequently, the RJ12 sockets on the panel side work fine for throttles, but they're not really recommended for full-blown Digitrax. Like if you're going to have a bus that comes off of these and then goes to other units and things like that. So just the full LocoNet is only on the back 2 plugs and not on the front 2 plugs. The front 2 plugs are basically for throttles only. Now I put up the NCE and the Tony's Train Exchange UTP throttle or plug-in because it's nice because you can use it as a connector. It's just straight wired. There's no resistors on it, no diodes, no nothing. So it's just a four-way junction box for the LocoNet cables. You're being troublesome tonight. I have no earthly idea. I'm not an engineer. What I would do is just go to your booster and your command station, a video. Go to your command station before you hook anything up and measure the voltage. Then you'll know. Yeah, that's a guesstimate. Yeah, when you're plugging in like a DT400 or something, it gives you the voltage. That's the battery voltage. That's not LocoNet. That's whatever the battery is in the throttle. So, okay, now I'm going to talk about the LNRP. This is a LocoNet repeater. This is, I think, one of Digitrax's best kept secrets, because this has solved a multitude of problems, especially on a larger layout. This allows you to divide your LocoNet into the same thing as basically like power districts. And what it'll allow you to do is isolate segments of LocoNet from others. And basically what I've done on my layout, and has worked very good, is I have all the throttle plugins on one segment, and then all the DS54s, DS64s, SEHCs, all that kind of stuff is on the protected side of it. Because believe me, if you've got operators plugging in and unplugging all the time, they will figure out a way to screw up the plug. I have had people, they plug it in, and I can't duplicate it. I can't do it myself, but they plug it in, and all of a sudden one wire in the RJ12 socket is crossed over the other. How they did it, I don't know, but it's a pain to fix. But it takes down LocoNet. And basically you want it to, it's only going to take down whatever segment that particular plugin is on if you're using an LNRP. The other, this is just an indication of how you would wire it. Basically, you've got the protected side is going to be the stuff coming right out of the command station. And then coming out the other end is, oops, this is too sensitive. There we go. No. This is more complicated than using my computer. But there'll be a plug on the front, which is good for throttles. And then the two on the back side are good for general stuff. Those are the ones I would send to your UP panels. Okay, the extent, and the other good thing about the LNRP is it also you extend the service availability of what LocoNet can power. There's very little power actually on the LocoNet cable. So it'll handle, AJ used to tell me it would handle 20 devices, which I think was pushing it. I think it would run out of gas before it got to 20. If you put the LNRP, it isolates it, and it also acts as it's a new LocoNet beyond the LNRP. Yes, sir. It comes with a wall wart. Yeah. It takes a wall wart to power it. But it's a handy little device. And it's also a LocoNet diagnostic tool. AJ loves his little LEDs. And if lights start blinking in, I won't go into every one of these, but these are all in the instruction sheet that comes with it. But you could, if your LocoNet is not working correctly, you can look at your LNRP and these LEDs will be flashing in a certain sequence that should tell you what's wrong with it, or at least what it thinks is wrong with it. It won't tell you how to fix it, but it'll tell you what's wrong with it. The other thing the LNRP comes in handy for, especially those of us, how many here are still using simplex radios? Quite a few. Simplex radio has a bad habit of you'll be running just fine, and somebody else on the railroad will plug in or do something, and all of a sudden you don't have control of your locomotive. And it's who's got my train, or I don't have control, or whatever. And what happens there is if every time you plug in a throttle, there's a momentary drop in voltage on LocoNet because it's loading up, it's loading down when you plug another throttle into it. The UR91, which is the radio receiver for the simplex system, has 0 memory, which means if it has any fluctuation in LocoNet power, it wakes back up and says, "Hi, I'm here." But it's not connected to any throttle anymore. So you have to reestablish the handshake by unplugging or plugging your radio throttle back in and letting the UR91 know it's there. If you wire an LNRP in there and put the UR91 on the protected side and only have your plugins on the unprotected side, then when somebody plugs into the unprotected side, the protected side stays up and does not fluctuate. So the UR91 continues to work like nothing happened. And this is solved. I've got a lot of friends all over the country who I've told this trick to, and it just eliminated all the radio problems. And this, to my way of thinking, is probably the best use of the LNRP, or especially if you got even if you have a smaller railroad that doesn't have a lot of other devices on it, because it protects the radio receiver and keeps it from getting that power fluctuation, or it only takes a split second for the power to go down and come back up, and none of the other devices will even notice it. But the UR91, it has 0 memory and 1 power fluctuation, and it's a brand new device. And the LNRP will solve that. This comes under bulletproofing your layout. Well, one will do the trick here. I've got multiple, there's only one in that diagram. It's going to the UR90, the UR91, UR92, and the UR93. Now, I don't really think you need it with the UR92 and the UR93. It probably doesn't hurt. But since they're duplex radios, they're doing the handshake over and over again. So probably, even if there's a power interruption, they will reestablish the handshake. But the simplex radios will not. You have my sympathy. Well, stick it and just put the UR91 on the protected side and have all your the things that are going to get plugged in and unplugged on a regular basis. Keep those on the unprotected side. Then the UR91 will just keep humming away, and it'll never notice the power fluctuations on the other end. No. You know, the simplex radio, Digitrax doesn't support the simplex radio anymore, but I'm a firm believer if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And if it's working, you know, the LNRP is a great addition to it that will make it work better, especially if you have a lot of operators. If you're the only one there, you only have yourself to blame when you do it. But if you've got other operators, I guarantee they will figure out a way to screw up a plug. And you won't be able to duplicate it. I have no earthly idea. I haven't worked for Digitrax since 2007. So, yeah. Well, you don't want your UP panels to be on the protected side, because that's where people are going to screw up the voltage on LocaNet. But you can put everything downstream, all your stationary your accessory decoders, all that kind of stuff can all be downstream. That can all be on the protected side, because they're plugged in once when you install them and you don't unplug them again. But you want all the stuff that is vulnerable, i.e. the UP panels, where people are going to be plugging throttles in and unplugging throttles on the unprotected side, because that's the side where the voltage is going to fluctuate every time they plug in a throttle, because it's a temporary thing, but it only has to be a split second, and the UR91 is going to lose its memory. But you can put every other device on the protected side. You can put your DS64s, your DS54s. I guess it's a DS64 now. Well, then use the LNRP extra. It does exactly the same thing. Digitrax did a dirty trick on me here. You know, they went for years and years and didn't change anything, and then all of a sudden they changed everything. But well, I came kicking and screaming for this clinic, but okay. And the bottom line is housekeeping. This is a good thing to know, no matter how big or how small your layout is. There are op switches in your command station. In the DCS 100, 200, 150, the DCS 50, 51. There is op switch 36, 37, 38, and 39. 36 will clear all mobile decoder info and consists. 37 will clear routes. 38 will clear the local roster, which has been explained to me many times, but is totally meaningless to anybody actually running the layout. Something that AJ thinks is cool. And then op switch 39 gives your command station a lobotomy. That's the one that if you don't have a bunch of other fancy stuff you want to erase, I recommend using 39. Give it a lobotomy. Do it before every operating session, because the boosters or the command stations never forget anything. So every bit of garbage that your operators have put in, they've selected the wrong address for a locomotive, they've done this, they've done that, they've pressed a bunch that didn't do anything and whatever, the command station remembers all. It's all in the stack. And eventually you run out of memory, and a lot of it will screw up the way that table deselect it. If you select it, I mean, if you just punch the numbers in, but you don't select it, you haven't done anything. But if you select it and say, oh crap, that's not the one I wanted, deselect it, or it's occupying a slot, whether there's a locomotive there or not. Well, it takes everything to a zero speed state, which is fine, which is a good thing to do. It keeps things from creeping and that kind of thing. But basically, it's still occupying a slot until you. Now it's occupying a slot, but it's not permanently there. I mean, it's if you were to look at the slots listed, that locomotive number would be there, but it's inactive, and it's not jeopardizing whether you can use that slot for another locomotive. Oh yeah, if you do, again, this is why I said, if you're not, that's why you've got your choice of different things here. But if you've got things consisted and that kind of stuff, if you do 39, the consists are going to go away. So you've got to, it's not without a cost, but there are so much garbage gets sent into not just locomotive addresses, but people just pressing buttons. We got people out there that, if I press enough buttons, I'll hit the right one, and all that's, every time you press a button, it's sending a LocoNet message that the command station is maybe acting on, or it's storing it or doing something. But eventually you get so much garbage in the booster or in the command station that it starts working squirrely. And the best way to somewhere you've got to draw a line in the sand and say, okay, maybe not after every session, because you don't want to have to put in the consists again after every session. I wouldn't know. They don't make any steam engines. But, yeah, I mean, you have to decide what works for you. But me, I clear the stack before every session. But I'm using advanced consisting for all of mine, so it doesn't clear CV19. So, but I do that because I'm using TCS decoders and I want the brakes to work in all the locomotives. But that's a whole different story. I said I wasn't going to talk about decoders, but now if you've got the new boosters, the DCS 210, the 240, they have, as near as I can tell, looking at the manuals, I don't have the products to actually work with, but looking at the manuals, they have eliminated all the choices and basically just give you op switch 40, which gives it a lobotomy. It's basically the only choice he's giving you, at least according, if I read the manual right, you're basically going in and just clearing the deck and starting. It's like a brand new booster after you do it. Okay, but all of this is meaningless if you don't follow good wiring practices. This is the beautiful wiring on my layout before I put scenery on it. After I put on it, it's whatever was the shortest distance from here to wherever the wire had to go. But while I could reach into the bench fork, it's all nicely cabled and easy to troubleshoot. But any wiring that was added after the scenery was put in takes the shortest distance. Okay, Digitrax wireless options. We've kind of hit on these. You've got infrared in every throttle that Digitrax has made and is making now. Although I don't think it's in the 602, and I don't know if it's in the The latest throttles might not have it. I'm not 100% sure. They don't? Okay. But all the DT 400, 402, 500, 100, 200, 300, all of those had infrared built into them. Then you got the simplex radio, which is the original radio system where the throttle talks to the railroad, but the railroad can't talk to the throttle. That's what it means by simplex. Basically, it's just the railroad's always listening, and the throttle will tell the layout what it wants it to do. And then the current throttles are duplex radio, and that's a two-way radio link. And oh, here we go. UR93 does not have infrared. Hey, I actually knew it to begin with. And of course, the UR92 is the original one. The UR93 is, I think, the current duplex receiver. Certainly. You know, there's a question and answer put to bed. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. That I am not sure of. I think so, but if not, there's a way to go in and manually, I'm sure, and there was on the 92, there's probably a way to manually go in on the 93 and go in and verify it or change it to the channel that you want it to be. I do not own any of the new stuff. My railroad was state of the art in 2007 and it hasn't changed. But no, I do not own one of the new throttles, so I don't. I am assuming, just knowing how digital, no, stop that. When I hit the wrong button. Other way, there we go. Now, the advantages and disadvantages of the different systems are pretty self-evident. The infrared is line of sight. It's notorious for working when you don't want it to, or when you don't think it should, and not working when you think it should. I don't really recommend it. Like I said, it comes with every throttle. You just add a UR90, which is the infrared receiver. But like I said, it's line of sight if somebody's standing in front of it, or you're in the wrong room, or whatever. It just doesn't work that reliably. But it is inexpensive. The simplex radio, the biggest disadvantage to it currently is that it's no longer supported by Digitrax. But it's got a very good track record. If it's installed correctly, it works very well. It's reasonably economical on battery life. You can generally get through an operating session without having to change the battery. UR91 includes infrared, but the UR92 does not. The simplex radio, disadvantages. Well, the disadvantage for the simplex is that you have to plug it in if you want to program or do any of the upper functions like programming or selecting a locomotive. You've got to plug it in to select a locomotive. Once you've got the locomotive selected, then you can unplug and you can run it wireless. But you can't program wirelessly. You have to plug it in if you're going to use the throttle to program. The duplex radio, when it's working correctly, it's like being tethered. It does everything wireless. You can program. You can select locomotives. You can do anything with the throttle while it's wireless that you can do when it's plugged in. The early ones This was the first batch that came out, and this was back, what, around 2012 or somewhere back then. So if you got a really old one, the DT402D, it did not, or the UR90, wasn't the throttle, it was the UR91 or UR92 did not play well with others. If you plugged it in and you had a UR91, a simplex radio plugged in, it was fine. And then if somebody came with a second DT402, you had nothing but problems. Digitrax solved all these problems, and all this stuff was, there was a firmware update that you could use their IPL programmer to correct, or you could send the throttle to Digitrax and they would reprogram it for you. But they did solve the problem, and all the current stuff, I think, works fine. Where's that table again? You've got to plug it in one time. It's got to do a handshake with the UR92 or UR93 to tell that it's out there. Once you've done that initial handshake, then it's just another throttle on the railroad. In fact, you only got to do that. I've got a DT402D that hasn't been plugged in years. It was plugged in initially to do the handshake, but once it's done the handshake, then it's just another throttle on the railroad. Yeah, but then you're going to a different UR92 and you've got to do a new handshake. And then you'll have to do a new handshake when you go back to your railroad because it's changed something in its little brain. Okay, let's add, those of us now we're starting to add Wi-Fi to our Digitrax systems. The easiest way by far is the LNWI, which is a Digitrax product, and it's plug and play. Basically, you just plug it in, plug it into LocoNet. It's got a wall wart to power it. And as long as you've got either engine driver or Y throttle on your cell phone, you can use it with no computer. Know that it works right out of the box. The only thing you have to do is make sure your phone is on the proper Wi-Fi network, which is whatever you'll do a search and it'll come up with I forget what it is, but you'll recognize it. It's like Y or LN Wi-Fi something or other. It's the name of the network that'll show up on your phone. Put your phone on that network and load engine driver or Y throttle if you have an Apple, and you can run your layout with your cell phone. Or you can use I'm using the TCS Wi-Fi throttles, and they are really, really nice, and they work fine with it as well. If you want to have a computer and you want to use JMRI, same thing. You have your computer with JMRI and Wi-Fi, have a PR3, an MS100, a local buffer, some way to connect your computer to LocoNet. And then, of course, any Digitrax command station, doesn't matter. And then same thing. You can use engine driver, Y throttle, or I use the TCS. And if there's any other Wi-Fi throttles, Wi-Fi throttles on the market, they should all work. This thing is sensitive. My shaky fingers keep pressing buttons. Okay, this is for Joe. It still hurts. Undocumented features and remedies. When I worked for Digitrax, there was a feature on the DT400 that we affectionately named Blinky. It's totally undocumented in any manual, and this comes under the engineer being eccentric and deciding that this would be a cool thing to put in, not having any idea what anybody would use it for. But essentially, if you look where this little circle is, if you look on the screen on your DT400, there will be a little dot. That dot normally is solid on when your throttle is working. It is non-existent when your throttle is offline. If it's blinking, you'll go onto your throttle, and of course everything looks normal. You'll select your locomotive, but nothing will work. Your throttle is now in standby mode. You tell me why you have to put a throttle in standby mode. I have no idea. We could never figure out what it was good for. But what'll do it, the way you'll get it into that mode, if you're like me and your fingers shake, and you're turning on track power, if you hit the button twice real quick, you go into standby mode, and you don't even know you did it. We got more tech support calls. In fact, at Digitrax, we used to have whiteboards on the wall. And we were encouraged to write on the walls. And in the tech support office, we had a section which was the Blinky scoreboard. And we were keeping hash marks up here for every call we got about Blinky. And we had this board pretty much covered. And AJ walked in one time, wanted to know what it was. I have never seen him get so mad, so fast. He erased it, but he never took Blinky out of the 400. Now, it miraculously disappeared in the 402s and 500s, but, and he could never tell us what it was for, just how to get rid of it. And the way you get rid of it is to press the power button, power on one more time, and then the dot will go solid and your throttle returns to the real world. But like I said, we got more calls from people that inadvertently put it in standby, and they had gone from one end of the manual to the other trying to figure out why their throttle didn't work. And it's not on the website. It's still not on the website that I know of. AJ has disavowed any knowledge of it, but it's still there in a DT400. And it's very easy to get into that mode. It's very easy to get out of that mode. Yes, Joe. Okay, well then maybe he didn't get it out of the 402. I thought he did, but okay, well maybe it is, but if you get Blinky, I don't care what throttle you have, you can get rid of it by just hitting the power on or power plus, and it'll go away. If you hit power minus, it'll go away too, but then your throttle won't work because it basically takes you offline. But if you hit power plus, Blinky will go solid, or the dot will go solid, and all is right with the world again. Why he couldn't put that in the manual, I don't know. Okay, this is Joe's favorite. I meant to bring a 400 with me so I could demonstrate it, but and this applies to not just the 400, but any of the Surpac throttles in the Surpac case. That'd be the 100, 200, 300, 400, 402, 500, all of them that had that case. Not the UTs, they have a different setup in them. But the 400s or this style throttle, answer the damn phone. But this style throttle has got the main main chip, and it's about a 1-inch square chip. It's got contacts all the way around. There's 40 some odd contacts in it. And it is notorious, especially if you've dropped the throttle. If you've dropped it, it's in a socket. And sometimes this chip will work a little bit loose, or if it's an older throttle, sometimes you'll get a little bit of, it'll work a little loose and you'll get a little oxidation on one of the pins or something. You'll get real squirrely operation out of your DT400 or your DT style throttle. And a lot of times you'll get really weird hieroglyphics in the display. The way you do this, it's going to be hard to do this with microphones in my hand. But you hold the throttle in this hand. Put your other hand out flat like this, and you whack the crap out of it. Just face down, buttons down, make sure you miss the knobs. Well, if you don't, the battery will come out anyway. But just slap it really hard in your hand. What that usually does is it reseats that chip, and 9 times out of 10, the throttle will start behaving itself. If it doesn't, the other option you have is to literally open the throttle up and just pull the chip out and immediately just push it back in. Don't try to clean the pins or anything. Usually just pulling it out and pushing it in will clean the pins enough that it will function again. And you can't put it in backwards. It has an indexing corner on it, so it'll only fit one way. But if slapping it doesn't fix it, open the throttle up, take the 2 screws out and slide the halves apart. Pull the chip out and just push it right back in. And generally just the action of taking it out and sliding it in will clean those contacts, and it will work fine after that. Okay, now it gets fun. Basically, everything that's been made since around 2010, AJ has decided it's much easier to have you beta test his equipment than him do it. So he has come up with the initial program load, or IPL. This allows you, it requires a computer, and the computer has to talk to LocoNet. But it allows you to update the software in whatever product, usually a throttle or even a command station, or basically anything, any of the stuff that everything but decoders. I don't think the decoders can be upgraded. But any of the regular products can be upgraded via IPL. And this is anything that has been developed since 2010. There's a lot of products they're making still that predate 2010 that are not IPL compatible. But any of the new products that have come out since 2010 generally have the IPL capability. And to do this, you need obviously a computer, and a PR3, PR4 local buffer, some interface with LocoNet. If you've got the new boosters like the DCS 210 or the 240, they've got the interface already built into them. You just have to hook a cable to your computer. You need the Digitrax, the Digitrax IPL software, which is available for free off of the Digitrax website. Basically, you'll connect your system to, and the nice thing about the way we're doing these clinics is all of these pages will be on the website, so you don't have to worry about really taking notes. You can go to the website and just look at them. And I have checked, I made this clinic in 2013, 14, something is when it was originally put together. And so I did all these screenshots back then, and I checked. Even though he's upgraded the software, the screens look identical. So everything is the same now. If you would go down and get into the current one, it looks just like this one. But you'll basically make sure your Digitrax system is on, open the Digi IPL software, make sure your COM port has to be set up so that you're talking to LocoNet. And this is the screen you should get, and allows you to set your COM port. And then we go to the next screen, which looks very much like this one does. You'll select file. And I kind of get ahead of you here because really you have to go to their website and download the file first. Download the file for the particular product that you're going to update. You go on their website, there's a section called downloads, and you go in and there'll be files for all the various different products that have updates available. I don't know if they keep the old updates. I think once they come up with a new update, they get rid of the previous update, but I don't know that for sure. But download the file, put it somewhere on your computer where you can find it. I would get by the time they came out with this stuff, I was working for Tony's Training Exchange, and I was doing Digitrax tech support with Tony. And I was getting calls saying, I can't find the file. Well, what do you want me to do about it? I don't know where you put it. So remember where you put the file. But when you get to this select file section, you press that. And again, you'll just navigate to wherever you've got the file. Click on the file you want. Yeah. Again, like this, you'll see this is come on, stop this. No, it's 9 o'clock. This is what up with you. Like this has got the DT402. These are some old files for things that I had. But you'll just select the file that you want. And then you'll click Find Devices. Make sure the device you're going to update is plugged into LocoNet. And the program will go out and search LocoNet for the particular device that you've selected a file for. Well, it'll go out and it'll list everything out there that it finds. Click on what you're going to select. Then click Start. And a little blue line will start going across programming, and it will your device might make a strange noise or something while it's doing it. When it's done, it returns to the first screen and you're finished. You can unplug your device, and in theory, it should have the new programming in it. The next one is the last slide. See? But since you already asked the questions while the thing was going on, there shouldn't be any left. Mm-hmm. Good point. I wish you had called me while I was putting this thing together, because that would have been a good slide, because the ground is important. No, that is an excellent point. And like I said, I wish you had called me when I was putting these slides together, because I would have added a slide, because it is a valid point. I just hadn't thought of it. But you do need a ground. The ground is very important. And like he says, you can get into a lot of trouble if you don't use it.
Norm, can you repeat that?
Any other
comment?
questions?
Can you repeat that comment? Can you hear us on the PC?
Well, that's a hard question, because again, you know, like you said, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If it's doing what you want it to do now, then I don't see any point in upgrading it to do something else that it's not capable of doing anyway, you know. What? Yeah. Digitrax does not have a really great, I mean, it's a good company, it's a good product, I love it. But like I said, the engineer, you know, AJ, is extremely, you know, don't try to tell him how to do anything. If it's not his idea, it's a rotten idea. But he's not alone. Every company I've dealt with has an engineer like that. John Forsyth at TCS, Steve Dominguez at Soundtracks. I mean, all these guys, and 90% of them are not model railroaders. So they know how it works, but they don't know how to use it. And that basically is the end of my clinic. And in theory, this should be on the website.
We did find at least one question online, and I'm going to try to go track that question down online in your presentation, and go find. Oh, they're in chat. Okay. Let me go. My mouse. Where's the thing? You just touch it, but it's not a. Okay.
Why is using old phone wire a bad idea? Because it's too small. It can't handle the current. Well, there's a ground terminal on every booster. Basically, if you're running multiple boosters, connect the grounds between all the components. In fact, virtually all the components, be it DS54, whatever, have a ground terminal, and just hook a ground wire so that they use it as a reference. No, do not ground that to your wall plug. Thank you.